Today, I'm going to install 3 Lutron Caséta dimmers with 3 Pico remotes in a 3 and 4-way configuration. Here's how it's done.
I'm Kevin. I'm a techie, a do-it-yourselfer, and a first-time homeowner. Join me on this journey while I make it my own. This is one location that controls the hallway lights, the kitchen ceiling, and the kitchen main light. The main light is just a fixture. As we walk this way down the hallway, we've got the same situation where we've got the hallway, the kitchen main, and the kitchen ceiling lights. I'm gonna flip these just so that they're symmetrical because I'm OCD. Now there was a third switch here that also controlled the hallway light. Okay, so for the hall lights, there are 3 light switches that control the circuit. One in the middle is the 4-way switch, and then there's 2 3-ways. This is one of the 2 3-ways. You can see that the screw that's a different color connects to the screw on top when the light switch is flipped on. When it's off, this screw that's a different color connects to the screw on the back. And that's how that works. And then when the switch is on, it breaks the circuit because these two, the top and the bottom screw, are now connected. The black and the white wire here were on the screws that indicated that the switch was off. I've capped off the red traveler wire, and the ground wire is isolated as well, because all of this is going to go into the wall, and I'm going to be mounting a Pico remote here to control the 4-way circuit. So this essentially is mimicking the switch being off all the time in this location. In this location, I've taken the wire that was on the off-colored screw, and I've connected it to the 2 traveler wires. This is the other 3-way switch location, and so this way I'm closing off this circuit, and a Pico remote will go here as well. Here's where the Caséta dimmer will go, along with 2 other dimmer switches that control 2 other 3-way circuits. This one's a 4-way circuit, so what I've done was taken the wires that were on similar color screws, and I've connected them to one of the leads on the dimmer switch, and I've done the same with the other. Before I put this back together, I'll be connecting this ground wire with the ground in the outlet box, but first I'm going to wire up all the other outlets, and in the end, what we'll have is 1 dimmer switch hardwired with a Pico dimmer over here and a Pico dimmer over here, all which will control these hallway lights, and that'll be the 4-way circuit. I'm gonna need all the room that I can get in this box. So now that I'm gonna make things a little more permanent, I'm gonna use these push-in connectors rather than wire nuts. So there's a visual indicator here so I can make sure that there's actually a good connection. And what I'll be doing is connecting each one of these by pushing it all the way in. You can use a pair of pliers to help guide you. See that it goes all the way to the top. I'll do the same for the other 2 connections. And we're good to go. Just gonna continue undoing the wires here. I've tagged the wire on the switch that goes to the different colored screw. That's for each of these 3 and 4-way switches in case I ever wanna undo or put different switches in this place. So basically you tag the wire that goes to a different color screw, then you disconnect the rest of the wires for each of these switches. Now I already know the power is off. I've tested this multiple times. Make sure you turn off your breakers and check to make sure that there's no power before you start working. I'm gonna undo the ground wire here. This is just a bare copper wire wrapped around and tangled. So I'm just gonna undo this. One more switch is off. I'm gonna get the ground wire out of the way for now. And what I'm looking to do is take this tagged wire and I wanna make this lead about 1/2 inch. And that's for these push-in connectors. So I'm just gonna snip this right about here. Just trim it a little bit. I'm gonna do the same thing with these other remaining wires. Now the connection that has to happen here, This tagged wire will go on one end of the switch. These two wires, these are the traveler wires, these will be combined and they'll connect to the other end of the switch. I'm gonna be closing off the three-way switch on the other end, so this is how we wire it. This is the Caséta dimmer that we'll be using. I've got two other Caséta dimmers in place already. So as I put this third one, I'm gonna cut these leads to be about 1/2 inch as well. You can always strip more back if you trim these too short, but I'm just basically guesstimating 1/2 inch or so here. I'm gonna leave the ground aside right now, and because I'm putting this in a box with other switches, I need to make room for it. So here on this switch, I've broken off the tabs on this side. For the middle switch, I've broken off the tabs on both sides. And for this switch, because it's gonna be going into the box, I need to remove these tabs. So it's very easy to do that. Basically just take a pair of pliers, grab this one, bend it back and forth 2 times or so, and you'll see these break right off. A little bit sharp because it's metal, so just be careful. But this is basically how you make room in the gang box to put multiple switches side by side. Now, as you take these side pieces off, you do reduce the load rating of the switch, so only do that if you actually need to, and if the switch is going to be sitting by itself in a 1 gang box, you don't need to break off any of these sides. So I'm going to go ahead and wire this up, and then we'll test the circuits. Since there'll be 3 wires going on one side of the switch, I'm going to use a 3 connector push-in. So I'm going to take the switch wire, I'm going to push that in here, and it goes all the way in nice and snug. I'll stick that right here. And you can see that it went in all the way. There's a transparent little window here, so I'm just gonna push it in as far as I can get it. And then I'm gonna connect these 2 wires to the Wago connector as well, or the push-in connector. So here you can see that I've got them all in. You can see that through the visual indicator. I'll take a pair of pliers and force them in a little further as well, just to make sure that they're snug. And in this case, that looks good. And now for the other side of the switch, I only have to connect 2 wires. So I'll be using a 2-piece push-in connector rather than a 3. And that's just to keep things looking clean. So same thing, just kind of push this in as far as it goes. There goes 1. And I'm gonna do the same thing on this side. Gotta get the angle right. There it goes. All right, I've got all the connectors connected for the switches. Now I've got some ground wire here to deal with, and I've got 3 grounds on these switches. So what I'm gonna do is use a multi-connector and get all the grounds tied together. So first I'll trim. This is just to make a clean look. I've got multiple grounds here in the box, probably don't need them all. So what I will do is tie 2 of these together and then insert them here. So let me show you how we do that. Trim that first. Then I'm going to wrap it around this one, just like that. And I'm just going to use some pliers to twist this tight. Got the grounds connected, basically one twirled around the other. I'm going to trim it here. And then I'm going to extend this, and I'll probably bring it out to about here. Perfect. Now I'm going to insert the ground into one of these connection slots. And we're in all the way. I'm gonna use some pliers just to make sure. Yeah, that's as in as I can get it. And then I'll do the same thing with each of these switches. Before I do that though, I'm going to position them where I think they should go, because I don't want to have any placement issues. Okay, got all the grounds connected. Now it's just a matter of pushing this all back into the box. Okay, I've got the switches in the wall, and I've left the screws loose on purpose so that they can tilt and adjust slightly. I'll tighten these down in a minute, but the reason I do that is so that I could take the switch plate cover like this, and you see how it doesn't always line up exactly? So you leave them loose and you just kind of work it in like a template, right? And that way I know where they go. The next thing I'll do is I'm gonna level this because I want to make sure that my switch plate is level on the wall. And so I'll use this level. It actually looks pretty good right now, but if I needed to adjust it, I could while the switches were loose. The last thing I'll be doing, I'm not actually gonna be using this switch plate because it has screw holes on it. So I'm gonna be replacing it with a switch plate that has no screws. So when this is finished, it'll have a nice, professional, clean look to it. Okay, the switches are installed and the screwless wall plate has been attached as well. I think this is looking pretty good. I'm on the other side of the three-way switch box, and now I'm just going to close off these connections by using those same wire inserts. Okay, I've got all three wires connected. Inside the connector, I can see that. I'm going to do the same for the other two switches, push everything back in the box, and then I'll be connecting Pico remotes. There's a wire on a different color screw on each of these switches. I'm tagging that wire with electrical tape because that'll help me in the future, especially if I ever want to undo this. I'm going to work one switch at a time so that I don't confuse the wiring. We'll start in the middle. Now I'm going to cap this off the way I did the other. Okay, everything is out of the way. Now we're going to mount the Pico switch. The Pico remote is a remote control that's part of the Caséta switch. These batteries last for 10 years, and this is a switch I'm not going to use very often in this location. Step 1 is to slide this plastic piece out of the Pico switch. Step 2 is to take a Pico mounting bracket. You'll see there's a piece of plastic here, and you basically just slide the remote onto the plastic. Once everything is together, all you do is mount this like a regular light switch, put the wall plate back on, and you'll never even know that these aren't wired switches. Okay, I've got the 3 Pico remotes in the wall, the screwless switch plate on. Now I'm going to put on the breaker, test the lights, and I'll sync up these remotes. All the switches work. We'll start with the hallway. These fade off nicely. Then we'll move to the kitchen main light. I'm going to turn that off. It fades off nicely. And then I'm going to turn off the kitchen lights. And those fade off nicely as well. All right, so everything is working. Now I'm going to pair up the remotes. I'm going to start by pairing the hallway remote. So I'm going to press and hold this button for 6 seconds. And then the switch will start to blink. Now that the switch is blinking and the lights are on, I'm going to work my way over to the remote control. and press and hold the same button for 6 seconds. If I do this correctly, the lights should blink a few times. Okay, and that should mean that I'm connected. Now when I press the button on the Pico remote, the lights work accordingly. Off and on. I'm going to do the same thing for the other two switches. Now that everything is wired and working correctly, I'll add these to my Caséta hub, and then I can control them with my app, my smartwatch, Google, Alexa, or HomeKit through Siri.
Ultimately, I ended up replacing all of the light switches in the house with these Lutron Caséta smart switches. You could see that my process evolved a little bit, where in this case I started using wire nuts and electrical tape instead of those push-in connectors. This is just because I had these on hand anyway, it's not really because I prefer one or the other. After a lot of research, I went with Lutron Caséta because they work with everything: Google Home, Alexa, and Apple HomeKit. They also don't bog down your Wi-Fi. HomeKit is Apple's integrated smart home software, built right into the operating system. Here I can click and hold different icons, and with my finger change the brightness of various devices. I can also just turn them on or off. And this goes for the whole house, so things like ceiling fans, smart switches, outlets, basically any HomeKit device is controlled from this one centralized location. Now all of these devices can also be controlled by speaking to Alexa, Google Home, or my iOS devices like my phone, my watch, or my HomePod mini that I have in the office. This is definitely one of those nice to have items, but it's very convenient, especially with automations. I was able to get creative and set some pretty nifty things up. Like this one. When I arrive home between 5:30 p.m. and 7 a.m., turn on all the outside lights, the floodlights, the driveway. At the same time, turn on inside lights like the foyer and the hallway at 75%. 5 minutes later, turn them off so I don't have to think about it. When I turn on the master bathroom shower lights, it'll turn on the exhaust fan, and then 20 minutes later, it'll turn it off. That's useful because the switch is all the way on the other side of the bathroom. I also have automations for lights I always forget to turn off, like the laundry room, which will turn off by itself 5 minutes after I turn it on. Here's a cool one too. So, I turn on the bathroom lights, and you can see here on the left that I've got multiple switches, right? One does the exhaust fan, one does the vanity lights. If I move over this way, the switch on the right turns on the shower, the switch on the left turns on the bathtub light, and then of course I've got the master closet. That's a lot of switches. So at the end, no matter what's on, when I press this one button, the hallway lights will dim and turn off, and then every other light in that area turns off by itself, including the exhaust fan. Here's a bonus tip when using traditional wire nuts for twisting wires. Twist them together, put them in the drill, hold it with some pliers, and give it a whirl. This comes out pretty nice, it's a very tight connection, and saves you from having to twist everything manually.